The Dallas Cowboys find themselves in familiar waters this summer, waiting to pay a star player. We're exploring how they got there with Micah Parsons and how they get out of this mess here today on Locked On NFL Scouting.
You are Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes, your daily podcast for NFL and college football scouting. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What is better than this? It's guys being dudes here on the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, an NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. Want to give a special welcome and shout outs to our everydayers because it is your teams here on the Locked On Network. We don't just say it. We live it. Today's episode of Locked On NFL Scouting is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account. Use code Locked On NFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Usually tag teaming the show with Joe, but to start this week off right, Joe's got a little something going on. So we're going to break the queue with the division by division roster assessment series that Joe and I have been working on. And we're going to stop, smell the flowers, take a look at the NFC conference almost from top to bottom. And I have a couple of breakout players that I want to get into, with the contingency being they have to be players that Joe and I graded as either rookies or incomplete evaluations thus far throughout our roster series. Pretty cool to do a follow-up with this with Joe, but we got to finish the rest of the league first. But today on the show, Micah Parsons had some words for the Cowboys, and then Myles Garrett had some words for Micah Parsons' situation in the last couple of days. So I thought this would be a good chance to kind of, especially because Dallas has been here before. Dallas just did this. Dallas just had this experience with both CeeDee Lamb and Dak Prescott. And for Micah Parsons individually, he told Clarence Hill it's going to cost them more by waiting. It's already kind of been a contentious negotiation window where Jerry, talking to the media, is kind of talking directly to Micah and kind of being dismissive of Micah's representation, which is poking the bear in and of itself, because Micah, of course, is represented by Athletes First. And I made this observation today for A to Z Sports. Micah and Dallas are not represented by the same group, that's CAA, that Dak took the Cowboys through 12 rounds with last summer. But CAA taking Dak and the Cowboys a full 12 rounds to the end of the summer and being the last quarterback to sign his extension, they realistically got just about everything they could have hoped, dreamed, and asked for when they sat down at the negotiating table in the first place. Dak got $60 million annual average salary. He got $231 million in practical guarantees out of a possible $240 million. He got an $80 million signing bonus, which is the biggest signing bonus anybody's ever got in the history of mankind in professional football. Like, if you're Dallas, what did you hold out for if you were going to give him APY King almost 100% fully guaranteed and a record-setting signing bonus? Right? But that's the playbook that CAA took, and they let Jordan Love and Trevor Lawrence and Tua Tagovailoa and Jared Goff and all these other guys sign first. And then Dallas is sitting here staring this big cap charge down the barrel at the beginning of the end of the preseason. And they had to jump. So while I understand what Mike is saying, that it's going to cost them more, this is probably part of the strategy. Knowing how Dallas handled being put to the fire this time last year with Dak and how they reacted, if I'm David Mulugheta, I don't want to sign the contract right now, right? Your only urgency is, well, what happens if Micah gets hurt? Well, Micah's not going to get hurt right now, or presumably not going to get hurt right now, because you're off until the start of training camp. I don't know how much we'll see Micah Parsons, right? Like these are all elements for Micah that he has to determine. Are you going to hold in? Do you want to risk the fines? all of this strategy that goes into it. The Parsons situation for me is a little different than both Hendrickson and TJ Watt. TJ Watt, he's been on a second contract. Mike is getting ready to play on a fifth-year option. Dallas has the franchise tag in their back pocket if it gets ugly. But Micah is absolutely right. The longer this goes, if you're angling to be the highest paid non-quarterback in football, that title currently goes to Jamar Chase. You will inevitably have somebody else who comes in, whether it's TJ Watt or somebody else, and that number will get bumped up, and then Micah Parsons' price will go up. I sympathize with Dallas because the precedent that they set for themselves this time last year, and then what they ultimately gave Dak Prescott is all the motivation for me. If I'm Mulgeta, I want to wait until Watt signs his contract. I want to wait until Hendrickson eventually signs or the Bengals cave and move him, which I don't think that they would. And the Cincinnati situation with Hendrickson is so team localized, right? It's such a unique team and how they handle negotiations versus Watt. And he ironically is represented by the same agency that Dak Prescott has. And they just had success being the last ones done. So it's really fascinating to me. But the Parsons one in particular, because of the precedent that Dallas set, you may as well. And if you want to haggle over whatever, couple $1 million, whatever. But at the end of the day, you put yourself in this hole with how you handled Dak Prescott last year. And I think the expectation is, unless you're going to give us explicitly what we're asking for, we're going to string this out and probably risk the franchise tag. And the franchise tag, probably Dallas views that as their friend in this scenario because the franchise tag at linebacker, right, it invokes linebacker and edge salaries. Now, there's some guys that are edge guys that get classified as defensive linemen, and how you ultimately divide all that up is a bit of a mystery. But that's how I view this for Dallas, is the sins of the Prescott management last year is now weighing on them even more as they try to come to the deal that they want to come to with Micah Parsons. So that's my thoughts there. I'm going to get into the NFC side of things as far as some breakout players, guys that are either incomplete evaluations or rookies that we've graded, both Joe and I. We're going to start in the NFC East, fittingly enough, with that Micah Parsons Dallas Cowboys team, the Philadelphia Eagles, and the rest of the bunch. We're going to get into that next here on Locked On NFL Scouting. Make sure that you guys stick with us. There's nothing quite like the NBA playoffs, the intensity, the buzzer beaters, the fans losing their minds. It's the kind of atmosphere you want to get in on for yourself. And if you want to experience this year's NBA Finals, Gametime makes it fast and easy to get seats for even the biggest of playoff games. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to tip-off, too. With killer last-minute deals, panoramic seat views, and all-in pricing, Gametime is a total game changer. I love the all-in pricing, personally. There's nothing I hate more than seeing a ticket listing and going to buy the tickets, and then lo and behold, it's actually 2x as much because the processing fees and all of the fine print that comes. So with Gametime takes all that guesswork out. The price you see is the price you pay. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets with lowest prices, guaranteed. My condolences to the NFC South. You will not get your moment in the sun here today on the show. We didn't do you yet. We got the AFC East this week upcoming, and then we have each of the Souths to close the next 3 weeks on the program. So no takes on takes this week. We will do the AFC East starting with the New England Patriots tomorrow on the program. So that's what you guys have to look forward to. But I want to start with this Philadelphia Eagles franchise that has a fair amount of pink, which is your incomplete evaluations, and some names that come to mind to me when I sit here and I look at the Eagles roster, and obviously love their draft class. I love Ty Robinson. I love Andrew Makuba. I think they're a team that has some really compelling players. I don't know that Jihad Campbell, with some of what he's working through, is going to be in a position to be that breakout player. I want to pick Sidney Brown. I won't, but I want to pick Sidney Brown. Between him, Reed Blankenship, Makuba, DeJean, they got a really fun back end. My pick here, I think Jalix Hunt, with the losses that Philadelphia's incurred in free agency, and obviously Josh Sweat leaving, and they lose Milton Williams, a little bit of a new feel group. They did not shy away from competition here with Uche and Ojulari, and they obviously traded Bryce Huff to San Francisco. Powell Ryland is a draft pick. Jalix Hunt we graded as an incomplete evaluation, who I think, with the increased opportunities that he has, and still having Jalen Carter, and still having Zach Bond, and having a Moro Ojomo and Ty Robinson and Ojulari and Uche and all these other guys, I think there's enough attention that he's going to be a guy who I think is going to be the beneficiary, because when he came out, you knew he was so raw. It was really just a matter of what's the developmental curve going to look like. And frankly, he was further ahead than what I expected he was going to be this past year. So I will go with Jalix Hunt for the Philadelphia Eagles as my incomplete evaluation breakout player. Then we did our full assessment, and Jalix got his moment in the sun when we did the Eagles review. So if you missed that, you can go back and check that show in which we did the deep dive on Eagles, and all the teams I'm going to talk about, we've done a deep dive on thus far. Washington obviously finished in second place. There's a little bit less in the way of incomplete evaluation. There's just not quite the ceiling with this roster as what there is with some of the others. I will call out Luke McCaffrey as my breakout, air quotes, breakout player here. When you consider they have an injury scare that's ongoing with Noah Brown. Obviously, Terry McLaurin's the straw that stirs the drink in the passing game. Zach Ertz, really nice descending player, but can be a target sponge. Deebo Samuel, I think Cliff's going to have a lot of fun with some scheme touches there, but a guy who like wins and separates and all that. I think McCaffrey is going to establish himself probably as the second best route runner on the roster this year. And they obviously put a lot of investment in him. He's a top 100 pick. So McCaffrey, based off some of the need, obviously they added Deebo, but that's a different kind of player, in my opinion. And Cliff's the right kind of different OC that's not Kyle Shanahan to bring that out of him. And some of the other names that they have there, Jalen Lane's obviously young players, or rookie who I don't know that I'm going to lean into his route running acumen. And Osborne's a player that really hasn't latched on anywhere outside of Minnesota, where you had the beneficiary of being an ancillary option in the passing game. So give me Luke McCaffrey. For Dallas, no shortage of options here. Man, I'd really love to pick Mozzie Smith. Mozzie got me good. I was a big believer in Mozzie Smith. But as I look at the incomplete evaluations and the rookies, it feels like a little bit too much low-hanging fruit to go with, like Izaraku or Tyler Booker. I think I'll go with Marshawn Kneeland, where they very clearly believed in Marshawn Kneeland in a big, big, big way. And he suffered the injury last year, but the traits are off the charts, right? And so Micah Parsons, obviously the identifying piece of the front. Fowler is a nice kind of rotational piece. They get Osa back on the $20 million a year contract, which I think is a great value. All of that, to me, in the same kind of spirit as Jalix Hunt, the right kind of role with the right kind of snap share, I think you could really excel in. And I think Kneeland can qualify for that same kind of thing. So I'll go Marshawn Kneeland as my Dallas Cowboys incomplete evaluation breakout player. And then there's the Giants. And I'd love to see Evan Neal win the right guard job. I really would. I don't think that he will, but I'd love to see it, just as like a guy who was super coveted, top 10 pick, hasn't really found his footing. Jalen Hyatt's a compelling name here. He added between 15 and 20 pounds of muscle onto his frame, which I think was sorely needed. He's not a great route runner and separator. He was kind of just a vertical playing guy at Tennessee. I think that physicality at the top of routes could really be helpful for him. But I'm going to go with Theo Johnson here. And the Giants have hedged here, kind of like how the Eagles hedged with their edge group with Ojulari and Uche and Powell Ryland being brought in. You saw the Giants bring in Greg Dulcich and draft Thomas Fidone. So I don't think should be considered an absolute lock that Theo Johnson's going to make a leap. But the Giants are in the top 8 in the NFL the past 3 seasons in 11 personnel. So they need that player to kind of emerge to give them an extra layer to their passing game. And I think Theo's got the best pedigree to do it. And obviously he was a mid-round draft choice in coming into his second year. So I'm going to go with Theo Johnson as the breakout choice there for the New York Giants. Now, moving to the NFC North, and we'll start with the Detroit Lions, reigning NFC North champions. That's the courtesy that you get is you go first on these kind of spotlight things and you go last in the week when we do the roster assessment series. I'm almost forced to go with a rookie here just because we don't have a lot of incomplete evaluations with Detroit. Some of the incomplete evaluations would include Christian Mahogany and Giovanni Manu and Mekhi Wingo and Ennis Rakestraw. Like those are the kinds of players that we look at and say, we don't really know. So I'm going to go with a rookie in this group, and I'm going to go with Tate Ratledge. I think Tate, obviously the retirement of Frank Ragnow kind of exacerbates some things, but they had been cross-training Ratledge at center before Ragnow made his announcement decision. So I think this is probably somewhat in their head. I think they kind of felt that Ratledge had this ability in him, and he's not a super long player, but he is a super athletic. I think his athleticism generally got way overlooked. So because of that, I'm going to go with Tate Ratledge as the breakout player in the shoes, especially because the expectation dropping off from Frank Ragnow is probably going to be pretty cruel to Tate Ratledge. Those are big shoes to fill. With Minnesota, there's a number, and this is in part because of just how much Minnesota has drafted from volume perspective in recent years. There's a pretty decent amount. I am going to take the low-hanging fruit here, and we're going to go with J.J. McCarthy. All right, he's had a whole year in the system to kind of evolve and absorb everything with how the offense worked. He obviously looked good in his brief preseason showing that he had. But Minnesota made the choice to not get married to Sam Darnold and give a big contract out or go any other direction, and Aaron Rodgers flirtations, and they've stayed the course, and they very clearly believe in McCarthy because he was their marquee investment at the position. So has not played a formal down of football, technically a rookie, but not a rookie. McCarthy feels like too easy of a choice as an incomplete evaluation who hasn't played for me to pass up. With Green Bay, I really want to pick a corner here because they need somebody to emerge from this group, even if they add a free agent, right? Like even if you told me they had a Rasul Douglas reunion, right? Or something like that with Jair Alexander, obviously on the outs and being cut. It feels like the right blend of opportunity and situation with a player to break out. I just don't know that I have the player I feel really excited about in the secondary for them. So I'm going to go with a player who can lessen the load on the corners a little bit. And I'm going to go with Javon Bullard, who we both had as an incomplete evaluation. Obviously, between McKinney and Evan Williams and Bullard and Oladapo, they got a plethora of options on the back end. But I think Bullard in year 2 is a second-round pick. Who showed some flashes. I think he's going to be a really nice player. And I think the corner situation might allow him to have a little bit more of that, perhaps nickel, if they're going to have Nate Hobbs be an interchangeable type player who could play outside and play inside. Bullard can kind of be the add-on player to bevy that a little bit and live in the nickel, and you can live in big nickel a little bit more. So that is my pick for Green Bay, which leaves the Chicago Bears. And Colston Loveland feels like a good candidate here. Ironically enough, we didn't have a lot of incomplete evaluations for Chicago. That in part because their defensive front, you've seen some free agent ads, obviously Deo and Grady Jarrett, kind of high floor players. Their offensive line overhauls come with a lot of established NFL talents. So they've taken advantage of having spending power as compared to we're going to draft guys that are going to get into elevated spots. As I look at the depth chart that we have for Chicago and how we have these players graded, Colston Loveland's probably the right choice. Now, I can make an argument you could have Caleb Williams as an incomplete evaluation as compared to whatever starter bucket you want to put him in. But we got a pretty big sample size with Caleb. So I won't go two quarterbacks in the North here. I'll go with Colston Loveland as the rookie breakout player for an offense that you don't take a guy in the top 10 with a new head coach without a very clear and distinct vision for how you're going to maximize that player. And they apparently had to pull Cole Kmet off to the side and explain the 12 personnel vision to Cole Kmet, which was a fun story to hear Cole Kmet kind of recall after they made that pick. So I'll go with Colston Loveland there. Now we have the NFC West to finish some of my NFC breakout favorites. We're going to get into that next here on Locked on NFL Scouting. So make sure you guys stick with us. You want to talk about teams going through youth movements. This Rams football team, the last 2 years, drafting big time volume. They have a lot of young players that are emerging players in incomplete evaluation spots. I'm going to go with Cam Kinchins, where you're going to play with this really aggressive and dynamic front in front of you. I think Kinchins obviously flashed enough. I liked him at Miami. He just had a horrible pre-draft process, and it kind of cooled me on him a little bit. And he didn't have very good tackling final season at Miami. But the Rams seem to have found that comfort zone with him and taken advantage of him sliding in the pre-draft process. So if he's regressed a little bit back to what I thought he was before his last year at Miami, then they've got a total steal. And I kind of expect that, I do expect this team to be big time players for Jalen Ramsey. I think they'll be in the market. And if they get him, I think that only ratchets it up even more of the kind of pressure and attention that Kinchins can kind of shade towards getting the football. So I'm going to go Cam Kinchins for the Rams. Seattle is the other 10-win team in the West last year. I'm going to go offensive line here. I'm going to just put the homer hat on. I love Christian Haynes coming out. I want to believe between him, Gray Zabel, and Laumea, I think one of those players is going to really fortify the perception of some of that interior offensive line. Because this is a couple of players that I was really, really high on. Laumea as a later round draft pick out of Utah was a little bit less on my radar. But I think one of those guards spots, if not two of those guard spots, the conversation 12 months from now when we do the roster assessment on Seattle is going to be different. And it's because one of these players is really going to have a breakout. So you might still perceive the interior offensive line as a need for Seattle, but it won't be the desperate situation that it's felt like at times that it is right now. For Arizona, I could go Max Melton. I could go Tip Ryman. I could go Trey Benson. I could go Isaiah Adams. I could go Darius Robinson. I could go Dadrian Taylor Demerson. I go Will Johnson. I go Walter Nolan. This is the team that has just had this dramatic glow up of depth and options and youth. And I love it for this football team. I think the fact that they have so much variance makes them, again, a difficult team to project. But it does make them a really exciting team to kind of sit back and watch how it all unfolds. I think with Calais Campbell in tow and Dalvin Tomlinson as kind of a stabilizing presence in the middle, I think Darius Robinson could really benefit from the tutelage of Calais Campbell. So I'm going to go there. Although if you told me that it was Max Melton or if you told me it was Isaiah Adams, I'd believe you in that regard too. But I'll go Darius Robinson based off my pre-draft process. I really like Darius. And then seeing Calais and his mentorship with guys like Deshaun Hand and Benito Jones last year and how those guys had career years. And some of that's Calais, some of that's Dolphins offensive or defensive line coach Austin Clark. I think Calais can have a big impression. And that just leaves the San Francisco 49ers, where this football team, big time overhaul. I think that's the thing when you listen to John Lynch talk, and he talked about some of this offseason was uncomfortable because of all the players that left and then how long he had to wait to replace them in the draft process. I'm going to pick one of these guys up front. I think Michael Williams is not a bad guess. I think Alfred Collins, in the midst of the edge presence that San Francisco has, could be a big-time stalwart, but I don't know that he's going to have the rush potential. I think Collins is the most pro-ready player. I think Williams has the highest ceiling. So between those two interior or defensive linemen that San Francisco picked, you can give me either one of those two. And I think either one, if not both, is going to be a big-time floor raiser for what San Francisco has on the defensive line. And Collins, I think, is tailor-made for early down type stuff. There's an obvious strength and weakness to his game. So I think the situations in which he's playing, it's going to be very apparent what value he brings, because you're not going to ask him to do a bunch of stuff that he's not best suited for. That is going to do it for us here today on Locked On NFL Scouting. We talked a little bit about Micah Parsons, how Dallas kind of dug their own grave in this regard. We talked about some breakout favorites that I have for incomplete evaluations or rookies throughout the roster grading series that Joe and I are currently working on. And that's it. We're going to hit the trail here. And thank you guys for tuning in here on this Monday. Keep it locked in right here on Locked On NFL Scouting. Make it a great rest of your day. We'll be back to talk to you all again tomorrow.